we get a feel for numbers. But now, if you could just introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of the work that you're doing to give us a flavour before we get into questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So my name's Neil Chisholm. I took up my post in June this year. I took over from Richard Welsh, who'd been the previous borough commander. Just to let you know how the borough's organised in terms of fire. The geographical Southwark Borough is actually represented by 3 stations: Dockhead, Old Kent Road and Peckham, but also the city, the Dowgate Fire Station, obviously to the north. Then you've got Lambeth Fire Stations to the east, which will take into Southwark, and Lewisham to the south of the borough. So the statistics I'm going to give you are for the borough as a whole, but not necessarily my 3 fire stations, if that makes sense. Has everyone kind of got that? Okay, brilliant. So in terms of incidents, I've gone back 3 years. 2015 we had 4,458 incidents at the Borough of Southwark. It rose in 2016 to 4,658 incidents, and currently in 2017 we're at 3,811, so the trend is going down. In terms of fire, in 2015 we had 920 fires, 2016 we had 784, and this year so far we've got 632. The more important statistic is dwelling fires, which again is coming down steadily. In 2015, 286 fires in dwellings, 269 in 2016, and 238 so far this year. Another thing I want to mention is special services. This is incidents that aren't fire, so things like floodings, car crashes, people stuck in lift, variety of things. Again, 1,512 in 2015. 1,668 in 2016 and down to 1,288 so far this year. One thing I would like to mention, the fire borough in Lambeth are undertaking a co-responding trial which has stopped currently. Just got some numbers for that because I think it makes interesting reading. The 4 boroughs that are trialling co-responding, so the idea is that Red 1 calls, a fire engine will go to the suspected heart attack along with the ambulance service. And we promised to be anywhere within 6 minutes within our borough, so it kind of worked. They've had 2,250 co-responding calls last year, which has resulted in 71 return of spontaneous circulation, which is where someone has recovered. If this was London-wide, that would be 585 lives that could be saved by doing this co-responding project. So that's just to mention that's happening in the Lambeth Fire Borough, but it does take into Southwark. In terms of false alarms, again we're seeing a steady downward trend. 2026 in 2015, it rose in 2016 to 2,206. We're down to 1,891 currently for this year. In addition to that, obviously our crews from Peckham, Old Kent Road and Dockhead were first responders to the Grenfell Tower incident. So the pump from Dockhead, the pump Peckham, the pump from Old Kent Road went on the initial call, which was 8 pumps 40, which was about 1 in the morning. Certainly not, I won't forget, I was there for quite a lot of it, and that was a game changer really for the fire service and for lots of public services. On a happier note, there was a fire in Peckham's ground. The house was 100% destroyed, but 4 people were rescued from there. The prognosis when they were taken to hospital wasn't good, but they all pulled through and survived, so I'd like to add that in. What we're doing, which I think is probably more relevant, I've been listening to what Simon was saying about engaging with the police. We've got a cadet scheme starting in Southwark at Old Kent Road. One runs during term time. The idea is that 12 young people will start a cadet course. Runs for about a year. Once they've finished, once they've passed out, they'll then turn into the instructors for the next cadre of cadets, etc., etc. In addition to that, with our partners in the police, we run junior citizens. We've done that for several years now, incredibly well supported and very successful. Something which is a little bit new, I think a bit groundbreaking, is work I'm doing now with hoarders in Southwark. It's not started yet, but my view of hoarding is it's a problem that's almost on the too difficult pile for a lot of people. We have got powers, or there are powers to remove the hoarded property but you don't actually get to the nub of the problem, which is the psychological issues for the hoarding. So I'm hoping to open up a support group for hoarders operating out of Dockhead Fire Station in partnership with Dr. Breen from the Maudsley. Hopefully that'll go on stream before Christmas. I'm quite excited about that. I think actually offering a solution rather than just a way of dealing with it, I think it's positive. Our crews have been out to many households in Southwark. In 2015 we visited 3,260 homes to give fire safety advice and fit smoke alarms where necessary. 3,294 in 2016. We're at 2,154 up to this point in this year. I'm quite confident, well, I know we'll meet our target for that. We've also had 252 visits and smoke alarms fitted by partner agencies such as Sale, Age UK that were. It is a challenge. The households that there are in Southwark with the resources that I've got, getting to everybody is a challenge. We did have a policy called a group risk visit where appliances from other parts of London come into Southwark and would knock on doors and kind of try and force our services on people, if that's the right word. That's now stopped, so one of my biggest challenges now is to make up that shortfall and find out how we're going to get to all these people. I think Simon's saying a kind of smarter way of doing it is to reach the people who really are in need, rather than a blanket knock on doors and hope for the best. Actually target the people who do need that fire safety advice and those smoke alarms. Also with that, on the safeguarding issue, starting to look at with the council the possibility of personal protection systems. Again, this is something that's done London-wide. It's very expensive, but things like portable misting systems, it's a bit like a sprinkler, but it's a very fine jet of water which doesn't cause much damage, but goes off in the event of a fire. It's specific and it's tailor-made, and it can be put into special risk, like high-risk individuals or premises. That hasn't started yet, but that's going to start with my colleagues in the council. We sit on the safeguarding board and also the Southwark Marrick. I'm quite keen on those. The reason being that if there's any threat of arson or threat of fire, we have promised that we'll be at a house within 3 hours to fit arson-proof letterboxes, and we are maintaining that. What else are we doing? We're working with the council on making traveller sites safer. The traveller sites in the borough. The council provided risk assessments and asked us to join in and basically help that process along. Another new thing they're going to do is all new council tenants, or all tenants that start to take up council tenancy, will be given a home fire safety visit when they move in. It won't be immediately, but it'll be within a time frame. I'm working with Paul Langton on that. That should go live again before Christmas. We're also, I'm not sure you're aware, we've got a change in leadership in the London Fire Brigade. Danny Cotton is the new commissioner. Tom George is the new Deputy Commissioner, Steve Apter is the Director of Safety Insurance, and their philosophy is very much people-based and community-based. To that mind, we are very keen to open up our fire stations to the general public. We've got community rooms at Dockhead and Old Kent Road, which can be used by any organisation. And now is my chance to push that. Please come and use our community rooms. In fact, I think there's bingo being done at Dockhead, which I think is rather nice. Anyone heard of that? Anyone joining in? No? Obviously not. As I said, I do intend to be brief. Grenfell was a game changer, really. It's made everyone sit up and think about fire safety. It's put it very much at the front of people's notebooks, and to that extent, the council are taking a very proactive approach to fire safety. In their work schedule, they're going to be checking for compartmentation in blocks of flats in council stock. That can't be done overnight, but it is being done as part of their cyclical programme of works. There's also they've implemented a zero tolerance policy towards communal areas in blocks of flats, which I know is controversial, but we do support that approach because sterile environment is what we would propose and what we would support. Apart from that, that's just a very brief overview. If there's anything you'd like to ask me, please do. And if there's anything I need to come back and find answers to, I'll find a way of communicating that with you. So.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I'm going to get an indication of how many are up on the floor. We can come back later on to the floor. So that's one there, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got quite a lot from the floor. So I'm going to go round the table. I'm going to start this way this time and come round. So I know Anne needs to leave at 9-ish. So let's get topics first, and then we will see how we get on. So Chris?
So my question was actually about the knee-jerk reaction. I said knee-jerk reaction about zero. But that's how... I use that word because that's how it's been.
Okay.
I suspect quite a few will be about
So I think we're going to get a few on that, but we'll put that down as a topic and we'll come back to it in a sec. Anne?
Yeah, I just want to talk about, you said something about communal areas. I didn't quite understand what sort of communal areas you mean, getting rid of the...
Yep, so that's the same topic. Grenfell lessons. Ben, you can have more than one as well, guys.
Good. Yeah, the zero tolerance approach, I'm interested in sprinklers as well, and the policy around compartmentation as well, and the stay put policy.
Okay, Rosie?
My question was also going to be about sprinklers and the home fire safety visits you're rolling out.
You can have sprinklers if you want.
Okay, Michael?
Mine would be around how information about fires is spread out, is distributed out in terms of education and what people should know.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the issue of stuff in corridors and storage around estates. I know that's something that a lot of people here are very interested in. So the first person to mention is Chris. So I'm going to start with you.
Because the term I used is one. I realise I go to a lot of tenants meetings. I'm involved in the Tenants Federation. So we've had, since Grenfell, we've had a lot of meetings about fire. You can imagine.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Doing a lot of work on Ledbury. And people are just so angry about the fact that they've just had all their mats removed from outside their doors without, it seems, too much explanation about why. If you're saying you support it, I'm not sure that tenants are aware that the fire brigade is supporting it. And so why I used that word was because the tenants are seeing it as a knee-jerk reaction from the council, that they're just having their mats whipped away from them, pots taken out from, and it seems to be a blanket action that doesn't take into account exactly people's, how the blocks are actually situated.
Well, it is a blanket approach. The legislation states that all communal areas need to be sterile environments. Whether a pot plant or a mat is a problem is I guess the main issue. The problem, I think.
Mainly.
Well, yes, okay, and I get that, and I do have sympathy. But the question then comes: how big is a plant pot? Define the size of a plant pot. I mean, a small plant pot is one thing. If you say you can have a plant pot, all of a sudden you can have 2 or 3. So the council, you can't go and see every single plant pot and inspect it for size or inspect it for is it affecting the means of egress, which is what this is all about.
But could you go back to the mats? Because I think the flower pots make more sense, but people, the fact that mats have been removed makes no little sense to them at all. I think we can make a better argument about the flower pot than we can about the mats.
Again, the approach is a sterile environment in communal areas. Now, the council have taken the view that we can't legislate for every single different thing, so we're going to have a zero tolerance approach, and that's what they've decided. Our legislation is quite clear; it's a sterile environment. Now, without seeing every single mat, mats are flammable; they're made of flammable material.
But has that legislation only been in place since Grenfell, or has it
No,
always been?
it's always been in place.
Right, so that's
So
what doesn't make
an
sense.
inspecting officer, which I don't do, but one of my inspecting officers could go to a block of flats and they could enforce on a non-sterile area, a non-sterile communal area. Whether they do or not would be down to that individual officer, but they would be entitled to. Now the council has decided that the zero tolerance policy means that there'll be nothing in the communal areas to maintain the sterility of it. That's been their policy, because otherwise it would be very tricky to actually go on a case by case basis. And as we all know, if you say yes to something, very, very soon you can have a lot more than you intended. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but I mean, the other thing that's been said is, okay, our mats have been taken away, but they'll be returning, because people will just put them back again. And it's
There you go. That's
because forever it's not been, the legislation hasn't been put into
enforced.
practice.
No.
So suddenly there's this is going to happen now, without proper explanation, I think.
Well, no, I think I go back to what I said earlier. I think since Grenfell and that horrendous evening, fire safety has taken is a lot more front page stuff. A lot of councils are starting to have to take it a lot more seriously and a lot more seriously, but be a lot more ruthless with how they enforce policy.
But we had Lacanau, so it's not our personal experiences.
No, I wasn't in the borough then.
So we've had Lacanau, but there wasn't that reaction to Lacanau. But now suddenly, I'm just passing a message, if you like.
Yeah.
That this is.
No, I do know it's an issue, and I've spoken with colleagues in the council, the fire safety manager, Mr. Rowson, and the director, Jerry Scott, and they've said that the way that we're going to do it is zero tolerance, because we want to ensure that all our communal areas are sterile, and I can't disagree with that. I can't make that wrong.
So Ben, and I'm just going to go to Ben because I think there's supplemental, and I'll come back to you, Anne.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I would defer to you on matters of fire safety, of course. But it seems to me that the council, it could be relatively straightforward for the council to apply this to high-rise blocks, for example. And it seems to me, as a non-expert, that there may be a difference between a communal area which is outdoors. We have a lot of external balconies where the plant pots are not in the corridor. There's a side area where they are. Compared to an internal corridor in a 10-storey block of flats, but I don't know whether you would still see a risk in that. And I've got a follow-on as well on the
Okay.
moving away from plant
Funny enough,
pots.
we are seeing a slight increase in fires on balconies. Now, again, if you say it's okay to fill a balcony up with personal items, that's all very well and good, but if it does catch light, something called the Coanda effect can happen. So the fire from this balcony here will rise, the air will push it to the next balcony, and you can get a jumping effect. In fact, we nearly had one last year, bottom of Jamaica Road, where a barbecue had been used, and it caught light to a plant pot, funny enough, that had been dried out. And the fire actually got inside the flat and pretty much destroyed the flat, but it nearly got above it. So it's not all about means of escape, although that's the legislation. But in terms of preventing fire spread, anything on a balcony has got potential to leap upwards.
I'm moving away from plant pots.
No.
It's still communal areas.
No, it's still
Come to Anne,
communal
come back to
areas.
you.
Yeah, one of the issues I have in one of my wards, there's a communal room used, and unfortunately it's also being used by staff from the council. So I'm just wondering, are we able to actually ring, do you have contacts that we can ring for them to come and do, as an assessment? Because there's paint underneath in there, there's people using it for cleaning materials, so we've got all mixtures. So we can't have it one roof for one side, and I'm constantly fighting about that room with the workers, but they have nowhere to put their stuff. But they've decorated it and left the paint there, or I find all sorts of things in there. How do we go about actually contacting people to come and see?
So firstly, that's a sort of housekeeping matter, and it's something that you need to take on board. I mean, from the fire brigade point of view, if we visit a premises, we have certain powers that are not used very often, but we can prohibit the use of a building if we see it's that dangerous that it can't be used. But that would be quite serious breaches. I think the first step is your internal housekeeping and get that sorted out.
Okay.
If it's a council property, maybe get on to the fire safety manager and explain to them.
Yeah.
But I think we would be a bit of a last resort in terms of in terms of enforcing.
I have taken photographs and stuff, but I'll try again, because again it's in the middle of the housing, even though it's not a high rise, but it's in the middle of the communal area. So obviously, if a fire came out, it would affect all the people around.
Well, so I suggest you contact the fire safety manager for here,
Okay.
and we can liaise on it. But if you get no joy after a month or so, then I can get an inspecting officer down there.
Okay. Thank you.
Back to Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the residents are confused about the change in policy or the change in enforcement, and at the moment, as I understand it, it's only those residents who have the mass or the plant pot who have been contacted. So of course, if a new resident comes in, they won't necessarily know what the policy is. And I'm hoping this is something the council will change, if this absolutely is the policy, to communicate that really clearly. I think another, and for the fire brigade to communicate that clearly. I think another concern is around security gates, and actually the police commander might have a view on this, because a lot of our residents, particularly elderly residents, have the metal security grills, and the advice of the council now is that those will all be removed as well. But where you have a resident who's been burgled several times and they're elderly and they feel they might want their door open in the summer, and so they have the gate on, it seems that actually the risk may be higher of them being a victim of crime than of fire, and at the moment there doesn't seem to be any flexibility with this policy. So I just wonder whether in your view there could be any flexibility in that, or indeed whether there may be a police view on the value of security gates as well.
I think we'd probably have contrasting opinions. I suppose all I'll say on the matter, really, my personal opinion, as a firefighter way back, some security measures used in some blocks, not so much in some, but in other areas, of such effect that it's actually quicker to go through the wall than it would be to take the door down. Some of the bars that go into walls, they're made of toughened steel. If someone does lose the key and they can't open the door, we can't get in, I'm only interested in saving them from fire. Now, Simon's obviously wants to protect their from being burgled, but I'm only interested in their, if there's a fire in that room, can we get in there to help them? And it's the same with windows as well. If I've got to spend time ripping off security door or security window, that might be precious moments that person doesn't have. So I have to answer it from that point of view. Now, whether there is an argument for what's the greater risk, I can't really go into that. I'm just talking from fire's perspective. Does that answer your question?
Not very helpful answer.
I'm going to jump in here just to ask. I want to ask members of the committee, councillors who are left, and one over there as well, Damien. So some of my residents in Camberwell Green, certainly, that there was a letter that went to everyone in the blocks. And I just wonder if that was a universal thing or whether it's something that has been a bit sporadic. So
I think it's sporadic.
Yeah.
I talked to two of my neighbours walking down the stairs recently. I've had 2 letters. I'm in a block of 8. 2 of my neighbours have not received any letters. I don't know what's going on with the delivery of those letters, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought they'd just gone to some flats and not others.
Yeah, so this is Laird House. This is all residents. That's a tower. That is a high rise. So maybe there was.
This is work from the fire brigade, from the council.
From the council.
Yeah, that's right. This is just me trying to figure out where this issue is going.
Just to help you, Chair, Councillor Noakes received a letter from Jerry Scott just today, and in the letter it says that all properties will be receiving a letter. So I think that's probably pushed the programme back a little bit. Are you aware of that, Stephen?
Yes, all properties will be
So all properties will get it, regardless of whether they've got a plant pot out in front of them or not.
Yep. So that makes sense. Yeah, Chris.
I'm just really concerned about the issues raised about builders have been in and they've left paint pots, etc. I mean, that to me seems an obvious danger. And why is the council allowing workmen to actually work in that way? I mean, to me, that's just so obvious that you don't need exposed paint.
Sounds like Anne's going to be raising it with the fire safety officers at the council. So let's get an answer next time about that.
How jobs are actually monitored.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Sticking with this particular issue, have we got any more questions up here on this particular issue? I'm going to bring in the gentleman just to your left at this stage because I know, and we don't want to get too much into specifics now, but I think he had a general question concerning the situation in his flat and his block, but around what things might be safe and what might not be. So,
I live on the Messenger. I'm on the ground floor. A ramp has been put in for me, so I can get it up. I can't get this inside my flat. I park it outside so I can recharge it as well. I've got photographs, I'll show you later. But they are saying now that that is a fire risk. The mobility scooter. I can only walk 10 to 15 yards. What am I going to do with it?
The question we talked about before, you were interested in why an underground car parking block would not be a fire risk, but your scooter would.
Yeah.
The scooter is a fire risk.
This is battery.
There have been instances where they're called, well, one they can ignite, they can combust. There have been instances. If you go to any sheltered housing, there's a room for the scooters where they go. It's a sterile room, so there's not any exits. In terms of your specific issue, I think that might be better off if I dealt with that maybe on a one-to-one basis.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what we talked about before, wasn't it? Yeah. Ask you general questions.
If this is a fire hazard, why are flats only 3 stories or 5 stories, whatever, who've got car parks on the ground level that go under the flats, and also the car parks that go under the flats? What happens if they blow up?
What, the cars under the...
Yeah.
Well, yeah. For a car park to be allowed under the flats, there must be precautions, or there must be things in there that are going to prevent that. So a sprinkler system, or natural ventilation, or smoke extraction systems.
But if it goes bang with petrol and it explodes, what happens to the people above?
Well, the concrete ceiling will take the explosion, and the sprinklers will put within that. So, but I think if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's okay with you, can we have 5 minutes afterwards? We can go
I've got 10 quarter of an hour if you want after.
Maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on from that particular issue now. I think we've covered that pretty well. So I'll come back to Grenfell, I think, because I think we'll all have questions on that. We might have a few. I'm actually going to look at compartmentalisation, if I've got the right word, and stay put policies. Because I know I've got someone in the audience who wants to ask about that. There's some. I spoke to a woman there from TRA who mentioned that there might be some issues around that on your estate. So I'll come back to you in a minute on that. But Ben, I think this was your one. So
first of all, can you clarify? Is it compartmentation or compartmentalisation? Because I've heard both words used. Compartmentation. Thank you. So the stay put policy has got a lot of flack after Grenfell. So the advice that people should stay in their flats because the fire won't move, and it was the same after Lacanau as well. But the policy remained the same. So the policy was reviewed and the policy remained the same. I'm interested as to whether you have any update on that. I know that in my ward, a private block on Spa Road, they have just this week changed their advice to evacuate, and my understanding is that's based on London Fire Brigade advice. It's probably 4 or 5 stories. So that's the exchange on Spa Road. So it's Notting Hill Housing. So they've just changed their advice to residents and said that's the Notting Hill said that, and they said that's based on advice from London Fire Brigade. But I've not seen the advice from London Fire Brigade. There may be some funny goings on at Notting Hill. So I wasn't sure when I saw that. I thought, is this the beginnings of a change in policy, or is your understanding that this is likely to
remain the same?
The policy remains the same.
And it does remain the same. We've got differences. We've got the Ledbury State on the Old Kent Road, where it's not a state put policy. It's a full simultaneous evacuation.
Yeah.
The reason for that is that there were issues discovered by the council, by a safety team. So we had a meeting at Old Kent Road Fire Station. There was highlights were raised. I think it was the same week, within a couple of days, the fire safety manager turned up with a Borough scope and identified that there were gaps that could, and the risk would be very small, but could cause a fire to move internally. So that's the only one that I'm aware of that is at full simultaneous evacuation. There are fire wardens in place to assist in that process. They're having heat detection put in the individual flats. There's an L2 fire alarm system going throughout the block. It's not all done yet, but that's what they're doing to maintain the safety for the very small risk of the fire moving inwards. So the stay put policy is actually it's been around for a long time. The reason we have it, if you imagine someone's in a house or in a flat and there's a fire in their flat, you've got a limited amount of time, survival time in that flat if it's alight. Now we've got to get from the fire station in through the door, up to the flat, in through the door and rescue that person. Now if we've got 200, 300 people coming down all through where we're trying to go in, that's going to severely affect the time it's going to take to get into that flat. So any delay that we've got in getting into that flat could affect that person's chances of survival. Secondly, the products of fire, as soon as we open that door, the compartmentation's finished anyway, because you've got smoke and travel. So if we were to do that and we've got people still coming down the stairs, they'll be affected by the effects of smoke and heat. Whereas if they're in their flat, most of the time, 100% of the time, nearly 100% of the time, they'll be safer where they are than actually moving out of that flat. The advice given with stay put is, unless you are compromised by heat and smoke, i.e. unless your flat is being directly affected, you're safer where you are, you're safer to stay put. But there is that stipulation that unless you're affected by smoke and fire in your flat, then you should try and escape. And that's never been changed, that's always been the same. So that's why we have it, and that's why that policy is in place. The reason it's not in place at the Ledbury Estate is because there are issues that you can't not know what you know. We know there are issues with compartmentation there, so we've gone for a full simultaneous evacuation under the direction of fire wardens. That's the only one I know of, though.
Well, this block does have a small amount of flammable cladding, so that might be related to it.
And also, if I could add that if that I don't know that address, if that is not in my fire borough, it could be in Lambeth's fire borough. I might not be privy to that.
No, it should be. So it's just off Range Road, yeah.
I'm going to need to know a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I'll find it. I've got the email from Notting Hill, and they said it's based on London Fire Brigade.
Probably halfway between Dockhead and Old Kent Road stations.
So that is definitely one of mine.
Yeah, they have got fire wardens at the moment because they've got some flammable cladding, but the residents are all still there. They're not being evacuated.
So it's not a council property?
No, it's not council.
Oh, okay. So that's like all the council ones I've known about. The private ones.
Notting Hill housing. There's some social housing there.
Yeah, some housing providers are a little more eager to engage than others.
That could be a good follow-up question.
Chris, you got something to
It's just
mention?
a really quick one. Am I right in thinking the wardens are actually leaving Ledbury at the end of October?
Once the systems are online, the heat detection is online and the L2 system's online, it's going to be taken down to 2 wardens per block.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to sprinklers and Rosie.
Yeah, I was just interested in what you said about, sorry, I didn't catch the technical name for it, but the kind of light sprinkler that you said might...
Personal protection system, yeah, it's a misting system, a portable misting system, so that's what they are.
And is that going, did you say there's going to be a plan to roll those out in Southwark, to install them in Southwark?
I'm meeting the fire safety manager this week with what we know about these portable protection systems, to cost it out, to see how we could do that.
Okay.
But I was going to say it's not on the run at the moment, but it's planned.
Okay, but subject to potentially if it seems to work financially and things, then potentially the aim might be to try and install those in buildings across the borough. Or
yeah, I think as Simon said earlier, resources are stretched at local authorities and in fire brigades. There's a lot of talk about sprinkler systems and retrofitting sprinklers to blocks of flats. Now that's fine if you've got the cash for that. What I would say is that sprinklers, it's an ongoing cost. It's not just the cost of putting them in. They're going to need maintaining. They're going to need testing. They will get broken. That will cause flooding. So it will cause more damage. But that might be the way you want to go. And I've got to say that sprinklers, yes, we would endorse that. The London Fire Brigade would endorse that. But without the money to do that, I think the portable protection system or the misting systems for those who are most vulnerable is probably a good compromise. But that's my view, personal view.
can I ask? It's not on sprinklers, but it's another quick, I suppose, follow up to one of the points you made. Was I wanted to know about the home fire safety visits that you're going to start rolling out, and if you have any idea yet of, I think you said that's for anyone moving into a new council property, and kind of what format they will take, whether it will be, just a kind of a verbal briefing, or whether you'll be able to kind of inspect electrical goods, domestic appliances.
We can't test electrical goods, but a home fire safety visit is quite a simple process where the firefighters will go into a home, they'll check the smoke alarms of the residents. If they haven't got smoke alarms, they'll put smoke alarms up, install them. And then there'll be general advice ranging from bedtime routine to overloading sockets to safe smoking, putting the cigarette out properly. And a range of advice, open fires, candles, etc., etc. So that's just something that we do for everybody. If we can get to them, we'll do that. So what is it? We're targeting new council tenants to hit them with an initial home fire safety visit. But my strategy with home fire safety visits will be to target the most vulnerable people. I think it's at the moment it's a little bit haphazard, to be brutally honest. We'll just find a block and knock on doors and would you like a home fire safety visit? I don't think that's smart enough. I don't think we're getting to the people that really need it. So sitting on safeguarding boards, sitting on MARACs, partnership with SAIL, Saving Independent Living, people like that are telling us these people are vulnerable. They're the people that I want to go to ensure that they'll actually visit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on fire visits or sprinklers? Michael, you had a question on fire safety education.
Yes, on education, I think I wanted to find out how do you actually make people know what their responsibilities are in terms of fire safety. I know that the council they've got a policy at the moment where ideally every new tenancy that is signed up, it is actually the RSO's responsibility to go through a fire check with the new tenancy. Well, I'm trying to find out from yourself, based on everything that has happened, like Grenfell, is there a way of rolling out an education system so that people know? I think most people get upset when decisions are made out of what is now been known as a knee-jerk reaction. If they were not aware, like the legislation you mentioned earlier on where it says everything is zero tolerance, and it's always been there, but people were just not aware of it. I think now that they are enforcing it, everybody's not sure whether it was there. So I'm trying to find out from you, what plan do you have in place to roll out an education program? It could be a leaflet, it could be community meetings, to make people become more aware of these things so that the resistance to change becomes less.
Okay, well, there's several strands to that. We have a schools programme, and every school in the borough is visited at certain points to give the children fire safety advice, which they can then pass on to their parents. So start young and build it up. We've also got the fire safety visits, which firefighters will come into people's homes and educate them on do's and don'ts, basically, of what to do at home to stay safe. In terms of the bigger stuff, in terms of the council stuff and the policies that the council implement, it's the council's risk. Does that make sense? But the council it's their risk to manage, and they're managing it as they see fit, with our blessing, because it's in line with legislation. Now, I think we've already said that the letters are going out, so people are communicated with by letter, not by email. So, in terms of how we're doing it, there is no plans to actually go out and say this is what the council are doing. This is the fire safety plan. It's not. We're not being that specific. We're giving general advice that we always have done. So, in terms of should we educate people as to why we're doing this zero tolerance policy, no, it's not our risk. It's the council's risk.
Okay, and we'll come back to VJ now. Question on Grenfell.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. I'm just interested in what you think are the most important lessons for Southwark from the horrifying incident at Grenfell.
Well, I don't really know how to answer this one. It's one of the longest nights of my life, and crews from, as I say, from the Borough all went on the initial call. I know that Danny Cotton, the Commissioner, has commissioned some new extra height fire appliances. The amount of money's being given to it. It's been approved by Sadiq Khan only a couple of weeks ago, I think. So we have got the capacity to fight higher fires. At the moment, what we've got, what we call an aerial ladder platform, based at the Old Kent Road. It's about 30 metres working high. Now, if you think about 30 metres, let's say that would be round about 9 stories, if that. Anything above that we couldn't reach at the moment. This extra height vehicle will give us more room, but still won't get us to the top of the high-rise building. The lessons learned, certainly about the flammability of materials used to clad a building, has been well documented, and I'm pleased to say that Southwark local authority stock has no cladding on it. They were very proactive with that, and any that was doubtful was tested and passed or taken out. I think in general, what lessons have been learned, I still think we're collating all the information really. There's 3 separate investigations going on at the moment at headquarters. There's a special team being put together, so there's the public inquiry, there's the police investigation, and there's a health and safety executive, and I'm no doubt whatsoever that things will come out of that, recommendations for future practice, but I can't tell you what they are at the moment. I could bore you silly with individual stories if they might. I'm sure you wouldn't want to hear them. So I think I'll keep quiet on that. But in terms of the actual lessons learned at the moment, we're more so actually mirroring Simon. We're more centering on the psychological welfare of our crews. As you can imagine, there were some pretty horrendous things that happened, particularly early doors in that incident, which a lot of firefighters are struggling to deal with, to be brutally honest. So we've gone into the welfare kind of cycle, and we are well way through that. And that's the current lessons learned, is that they are human beings, these firefighters, and they are struggling. So in terms of procedures, practices, legislation, that's a good thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. I guess where am I going with? So Chaucer, we don't have very many towers, but the 1 or 2 I can think of. I mean, what kind of things might you do differently as a consequence of Grenfell if you had to go to a fire in a tower in Southwark today?
What would we do differently?
Would there be anything you'd do differently? That's a good point.
And that was a particular set of circumstances that I genuinely have never repeated. It was flammable cladding, it was a hot night, the fire started quite intense. The item of equipment that started the fire, and it went up at a rate that no one's ever seen before. I must admit, it was hard to legislate for that kind of occurrence.
No.
Okay, does anyone up here have any more questions before I move to the floor? No? Just one from me before we do. You were listing a number of incidences earlier, and I think you were saying that fires have gone down over the last few years. I remember at the time where we were losing fire stations that there was a lot of concern in Southwark that the reduction in the fire service would mean fewer fire safety visits, and therefore all the good work over years of educating people and bringing that down would start to reverse. It doesn't sound like you're hearing, it doesn't sound from your figures that that's happening at the moment. Do you have any idea why, when on paper it always seemed that you would have to do less? But is that not the case?
There's two targets for home fire safety visits. One's a borough target and the other's an individual station target. The individual station targets are always hit. They will get achieved. The borough target for Southwark one, we've had a 50% reduction since they closed Southwark and took pumps from Peckham and Old Kent Road, and we can't meet that volume. So we did the group risk visit, what we call a group risk visit, where appliances from, I don't know, for example, Bromley, Bexley, Greenwich, wherever, would come into the borough for an afternoon or for a day, and they would just visit a block and knock on doors and try and get the numbers up that way. So the numbers I mentioned were my fire stations doing their bit.
Yeah.
The others, the actual borough target, won't get hit because it's too large for the amount of resources that we've got.
Sure.
I mean, the strategy, when they reduced the cover, the then London Mayor, or the LPPA, made a decision to reach every household in London, first appliance within 6 minutes, second in 8. And that didn't matter where you were in London. So the far reaches of Beacon Hill would have two appliances within 8 minutes, which was tricky because they weren't so populated in those areas with fire cover. Whereas Southwark, you had an awful lot of appliances within a very short space of time. So they decided their strategy was that we could take fire engines from the centre, where there's a lot more cover, and move it to the suburbs where there wasn't. And that's what the strategy was based on. Based on every household getting 2 fire engines within 8 minutes. That's the reason that was touted for losing Southwark Fire Station, well as pumps from Beacon Hill came around.
But as yet you haven't seen what at the time was a predicted increase in fires as a result of fewer people being educated on how to prevent them in the first place. That's not happened yet? No. Okay. Going to move to the floor now. So I've got one here.
Are you saying that's the strategy, well, to shut the fire stations in central London in order to provide for outside?
Yeah.
When there's a massive more number of people live here than outside.
I'm saying that.
Right, okay, so you said someone went from Southwark, an engine went from Southwark to Grenfell?
Three.
Right. How long does that take?
To Grenfell.
From Southwark?
On the blue line.
Yeah, whatever, on what?
About 15-20 minutes.
Right, and on the way, how many closed fire stations will you pass? There must be any number that you pass.
I'd guess Southwark, I'd guess Clerkenwell, Westminster possibly.
No, that's how many boroughs. I said how many stations?
No, that's
Station.
That's 3. You think that's 3 between here and Grenfell?
But they were closed. Yeah, I mean I can't remember the exact ones that were closed. Downham's closed, Clerkenwell, Belsize, Southwark obviously.
It's an interesting question, but I'm not sure our borough commander can do much about a national and mayoral decision on fire resources, which, as you remember, was 3 or 4 years ago and was massively controversial here.
The only one who can do anything about that in this place is him.
Yeah.
Is it?
Oh, I don't think it's within his power to determine how resources are allocated across London, but I think the commander, like all of us, would want to be lobbying for more in Southwark. I think that's always the case.
But he'd only lobby if we lobby him, would it?
I think that goes on anyway.
If he could, he would.
Yeah.
If you gave me back Southwark Fire Station and gave me my fire engines at the Old Kent Road in Peckham, there would be no one happier than me. But they made a decision, the LPPA made a decision.
Yeah, I agree.
To do that.
I just think it's the wrong decision.
Well, I might think that as well, but I'm not going to think
Okay. We've got the gentleman at towards the next to the gentleman who's just spoken. I think you had a question.
Myself.
Yeah.
Well,
question I wanted to ask was relating to my estate.
Yeah.
I'm a chairman of an estate local, which covers nearly 900 homes. We have one particular block that I'm concerned about, what I know of the roof being condemned on the block.
The what, sorry?
The roof being condemned.
Right.
How do we find out more about this, like, when we're talking about moving combustible materials away from outside doors, doormats and hazards? I'm not sure if you can answer this, but what is Southwark going to do for us residents of what we know is wrong and what they're doing?
Well, as I say, I don't think I can. I think you need to contact the fire safety manager because
It was by the LFB who condemned it.
But what?
The fire brigade condemned the roof.
The fire brigade condemned the roof.
They said the roof is condemned. It's not safe.
There's no fire petitions in the route on Lucy Way. On Lucy Way, it goes from number 2 to 224 or 244. As far as I'm aware, it's like on the ground floor. You've got 1 flight of stairs up, go up onto the next level up, and you've got 2 flights up. It's like an horseshoe.
What block's this?
It's Lucy Way.
Lucy Way.
Rural Road Estate.
In the what state?
Rural Road Estate.
ROUEL.
When it was the fire?
We had a fire there approximately 2009, 2010. It took quite a while to actually get water up into the block. To even get near the block it's horrendous to get onto the estate. For Farrington to even be able to get onto an estate, there is nowhere for it to get onto the estate, basically.
Okay, so there's 2 issues then. So you're saying that we came and inspected the premises?
Well, the premises caught alight.
Right, so
back in 2009, 2010.
I think I'm going to have to. I'll take your name.
Okay.
I think I'm going to have to investigate this a bit more because it's news to me. I say I started in June this year.
Okay. And then obviously, I mean, there is something else which I'm concerned about. At the rear of it, Southwark Council has gone and leased off some land behind it,
right?
Which now breaches B5.
Right.
Could you tell me about B5? Is this about what space and appliance needs to turn around?
The best thing to do is if I take your name and address, and I'll send an appliance down there because we do need access to things and we can take steps if we can't get access.
Okay.
But
you've got no charge in Lucy Way.
Well, okay, let's go down and have a look then. So
thank you very much.
I
appreciate that. 3 weeks ago, I mean, I spent 2.5 hours with Dave Ralston on the estate.
All right.
So Dave is very aware of it and very concerned about what he has seen now.
Well, maybe we can have our way to Dave Ralston then and do a joined up thing.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Will you share details at the end of the meeting so that we can get this sorted?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This gentleman here.
John, I've been in touch with Damien about the zero tolerance issue with the letter as regard to security gates. And in St Saviour's Estate, to the best of my knowledge, all the blocks are open to the air. So putting the business of the plant pots and the mats being either a fire risk or a trip risk for, needed to be a sterile environment. I don't understand where the zero tolerance policy has been decided that the gates, the grills, are more of a risk to the tenant who's decided to put that grill up themselves, like myself and other people. Yet everything that I heard you, Simon, is it Simon? Yeah, everything that you said earlier describes everyday life on how we live, coming backwards and forwards at night to those blocks. And as a tenant that's been attacked at the door, I've been, gay for 40 years. I know what it's like to have to run from gangs or youths, and especially if the police aren't going to be able to deal with them because they've gone on rat runs through Lucy Way, through Bromley House, and they've disappeared. Is they're never going to be caught? And if I phoned up and wasted police time with every report of having got into my house safely and shut the security gate, I would be wasting police time. So there's been a number of occasions where that gate has saved my life, and the police who came to the house basically said, if you hadn't have got inside and shut that gate, because I didn't know who it was at the door, I opened the door to see who it was, and they basically used the element of surprise to to say we're going to kill you. So my problem is that I've been in touch with Damien. I've tried to speak to my housing officer, and I don't understand where the zero tolerance affects everybody to say you've got to remove your security grill because the liability of you having a fire outweighs the liability of everything that you've said earlier that I have to live within as long as I've lived in this block. It doesn't make sense. Because if I know that I've got a fire extinguisher, I've got I turn the gas off whenever I leave the house for a long period of time. You know, I'd love a personal protection system, but I need that gate. So there's two people in the block that are 90 years of age. One is elderly, can't move. She's a drinker and a smoker. There's another one who's a smoker and not so much a drinker, but they are both more likely to start a fire. And yet they are allowed to have a gate. Yet when I spoke to somebody at the council, they said, no, their gates are going. But when I went back down to them, they said, no, we've been given special permission. So there is a special dispensation to get round this zero tolerance issue, is that these two people specifically in Bromley House on St Saviour's Estate have been given permission to have security grills, and they are not going to be removed. Yet all I'm hearing is that this zero tolerance is going to get bigger, everybody's going to receive a letter, and everybody's gates are going to be removed whether they like it or not. And yet, I've heard the guy that was here earlier, he knows that someone else on another block, they're just going to move their security grills inside. So you'll end up having like a New York, kind of Brooklyn situation where you've had an effect of taking the gate that was visible, that stopped a burglary, that stopped an attack, that stopped that person having a problem with an attacker or any kind of harassment. Yet, if you take that gate off, people will be forced to use money they haven't got, and they're going to end up putting a gate on the inside, which is going to be more of an impediment to you, yet at least you knew the gate was on the outside beforehand. You could just go put the fire hose through a window. Or, does that make sense? Is that I just don't see where the zero tolerance policy has been applied on this letter to say, right, we're going to keep a sterile environment, but also, third paragraph, we're just going to tack on the end, we're going to take all your security gates off.
Can I just before you answer that, can I just ask Stephen to jump in and just, are you aware of any exemptions on the security gate issue? Is that something that's plausible?
Yeah,
is that likely?
I'm not aware of any. But I can certainly.
I'd like to know more about that.
One of the door numbers I am fully aware of, and I am not aware that there's a special case for that. In fact, she's a lady that some years ago was raped by an intruder into her property, which is her concern. She's also disabled and she has breathing difficulties as well. So come the summertime, she'd like to keep the door open with the grill shut to be secure but still get air through. And I think, well I'm speaking now, so I might as well finish up. I just think that the zero tolerance policy is lazy. I think it's very easy to say, look, let's just make it easy for ourselves and make it a zero tolerance policy. Southwark has always had one where it will take it on a case-by-case basis, and I think some people have taken the mickey, quite frankly, with that, and I don't think that should be allowed to continue. But there are some circumstances where these grills mean the difference between someone being able to live their life normally and where they would have a high amount of anxiety. I really don't believe that the zero tolerance policy is anything but just easy to do. I think there's a reason for things to be taken away. Pot plants, for example, there's a lady that comes out her front door, she's got a balcony that runs across the front, but she's at the end of that balcony. So her escape route is in the opposite direction to where those plants are. So, logic dictates that, quite frankly, that's not a problem. That's not going to be a trip risk. And it's an open balcony anyway. So I would really like Southwark to look at it again. And I think you might have sold your guys a little bit short. Councillor Noakes was here earlier, he had to go. He actually witnessed and called in a fire. He was door knocking and campaigning. And he witnessed a fire, which did have a grill on it. He said your lads got there, they had some sort of tool, crowbar type tool, and with a flick of the wrist, that grill was gone. So
that one it was possibly, but there are some.
Yeah. Okay.
Individual designs. So yes, if it's just a mesh, I don't know, pinned to the door, the hooligan bar could easily take that off.
Yeah.
If it's a bit more meaty and it's actually steel, hardened steel bolts going into the wall, that's a different matter.
Do you not accept the criticism, though, that a zero tolerance policy is lazy?
it could be argued that it's lazy. If they didn't have it, how would they ensure that we didn't have plant plots that turn into planters?
Because all of the blocks have residential services officers who are responsible for and know their blocks intimately. So they could certainly be the arbiters, if you like, of what's acceptable with proper training and what's not.
Yeah, but again, that's an issue for yourselves, I think, and the fire safety manager at the council. I can say that a sterile environment is what we would ask for, and we could enforce on if we had to.
Of course, you would prefer not to have gas or electric into the property. I understand why that would be an advantage to you. There needs to be a balance, I think, and we're not striking that balance.
Well, so taking the policy or taking the legislation by rote, that a sterile environment means a sterile environment. Now, if that's how that's enforced, it's partly down to the council. We can enforce on a block of flats, a communal area. We've got no powers inside a flat, but we have on the communal areas. That then comes down to an individual decision. That inspecting officer, they do visit that flat or that block of flats and say, no, this needs to go, this needs to go, this needs to go. Whether they do that or not, that's an individual decision. But they wouldn't be wrong to say no plant pots, no mats, because it is a sterile environment. Technically, they wouldn't be wrong.
Maybe Stephen can answer that.
Is it kind of a follow-up on that? Yeah. Is there or could there be a London Fire Brigade approved security gates? Does such a thing exist, or could it no? Just get a cheap one that can come up that looks effective but isn't. It's.
Is there a situation you're saying that you don't think that there's a policy where individuals in my block, for example, have permission to have these gates? Is there not a situation where the police and the fire brigades have master lock key numbers for a certain address where they know the person is elderly and they have a gate? Is that not true?
No. So
you don't go, oh, actually, we're turning up, we've got a fire at number 2 Bromley House. Yeah, we've got the key, we've been sent it through.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
How many keys we need?
Okay.
We need quite a few keys over it.
Okay. So one other point though, but just to bring it back together, is that it does seem that the whole point about sterile environment and security gates, which being the choice of the individual, seems to have been lumped together in this zero tolerance policy, because this same letter was sent out in 2015 when on our particular area we got it from Matthew Limbrick, who basically got loads of feedback and said, well, you can't do this, you can't, these are the reasons why, and nothing happened. And it seems like someone in Southwark Council, so I'm not addressing this to saying this is your fault or even yours to resolve, but someone in Southwark Council is lumping this thing about security gates in with this zero tolerance policy, which has come from Grenfell, and it's your wish to have a sterile environment. And the two have got nothing to do with each other, because as David said, you can put a fire out in a house with a security gate, because that's not the problem. If you've got access to that block, my gate is not causing a problem to anybody. It's not in anybody's way. The tenants on the other side can get out. But when I'm living my life every night that there's not a fire, I'm the last person on my block because there's no fire escape on the other direction. So I've got to go 4 doors down. But if I'm the last person there, anybody coming behind me can do anything they want to me because I've got nowhere else to go. So what I'm saying is that the chances of having a fire, and I'm not saying that they should be ignored, but every other night that you want to live and you've got that security gate is a decision that's got nothing to do with plant pots and zero tolerance and everything else. Is that there should be the ability, if I say I want a security gate on my house, on my flat that I live in every day in this block, in this borough, that's my decision. It's got nothing to do with keeping the communal area clean. Or clear of obstruction. And so I'm not necessarily addressing it to you.
We're going to move on from this.
Yeah, I know you're going to move on, but what's the point
point
of being here and having a public statement
we've made
if
the
nobody's
point.
going to listen, if nobody's going to listen and do something?
We will pass back your comments to the council. I'm very unsure as to what the borough commander can tell you that he hasn't already told you.
No, that's why I was addressing it backwards and forwards. Because
it's very important that we do get you some answers, and I think if Stephen can take some details and get back to you, and we would like as a committee to hear those answers as well. But
it should be nice to get something done.
Absolutely.
The two problems are separated.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask this gentleman here to come in. I saw a hand up there as well. I've got Chris, and then we're done. So, very quickly,
Yeah,
because you've already had a
the
question.
council also saying that they never give permission for this gate. I've got a gate.
Yeah.
For this gate to be installed.
Is this is about the same subject?
The gate, yeah, can I just I need to
So,
share
what's your question to our guests who are here this evening to take questions? Have you got a question to the Borough Fire Command?
Well, I've got a question. Because
or have you got a question that you'd like to address?
If gate is a problem, does laminated flooring a problem as well? Because at the end of the day, all I'm saying is that my gate is a self-release gate.
That's the question. The question's there. Is laminated flooring a problem?
Laminated flooring?
That was the question, I think, so...
Is laminated flooring a problem?
Because, yeah, it's a fire hazard. Because if a doormat is a fire hazard, because it's in a communal area, what about people who have... A lot of these blocks have laminated flooring. Does that come under, like, hazard? Because is that going to be next when laminated flooring will start coming off from individuals?
In the communal areas?
No, I'm talking about in the flats.
Well, in the flats, we've got no authority to enter a flat. So, it's, in a sense, that once that door's closed, that area there is between you and whoever owns the flat, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but my gates does not obstruct any communal area,
yeah.
And it's the same.
Okay, we're back to gates again. We've done gates. Next question, thank you.
Zero tolerance policy. I had a letter to tell me about my plant pots and communal areas on the ground floor of my own garden. So I contacted the council and said, it's not communal. Communal means shared. This is a garden. Debate, and they still won't. They've said to me, I'm breaching my tenants' regulations by this, which is not. I've had Dave Rowson down, and he agrees with me. There's no problem at all. And still, they're inflicting this message to me that I've got a communal area and it's a ground floor garden and flat. And I was selected out of a row of gardens because I've got the most plants.
So what's happened to you then?
I've been told I'm breaching the regulations because I've not cleared my plant pots.
But Dave Rowson, who's the fire safety manager, said it's fine.
Okay, but he's had this for several weeks. I've had nothing back from anybody to say, sorry about this.
But Dave Rowson does understand that he's the fire safety manager. So
absolutely.
So if he said it's all right, then it's all right.
Yeah, but
I've just had an indication from Stephen that he'll take the details at the end and deal with it for us. It's another council question.
It
Chris.
just seems to me that this is an issue that has actually got to be dealt with by the council.
Yeah. Agreed. So
the zero tolerance isn't as a result of Grenfell Tower. It's always been legislation, which is now being put into place because of what happens on Grenfell Tower. My question is, why wasn't it put into place when Lacanau happened? That was ignored, but now...
people died.
So
they told me.
People died.
No, yeah. I might share your cynicism. It's
what's the question?
It's not so much a question to yourself as to this meeting. That it's an issue we need to take up with the council. That it's not being managed properly, because you can't. If you've got somebody on this, you can't say to one person living in a strip, you can have your pot plant, but the person next door you can't, because that's not going to work. It's got to be sensibly looked at, and you know. You say you can't take it individually. I think every block has to be taken individually to see what the real problems are, rather than do this blanket thing that's just made people really angry and feel that they're sort of... I live in a house, aren't I lucky? No one else says I can't have a mat in front of my house. But if you live in a different situation, the way it's been done, it's been imposed. If people are given a reasonable argument, people will go with it. It's the way it's been done. They have literally had their mats removed, and people just feel really indignant about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Council got to start talking to people.
We're going to leave it there. We may we'll talk to some officers and see whether we can get some council information back on that for this meeting, and maybe have a session on it. But at this point, I'd like to thank both our guests tonight, Neil and Simon. It's been great to have you here and to hear about the work you're doing in difficult circumstances with difficult budgets, in the same way that we have here at Southwark. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the time you've taken this evening. and we look forward to seeing you in a year if you'll come back and see us again.
Thank you.
Good evening, cheers.